Dr. Monika Tangney is a pelvic floor physical therapist specializing in pregnancy, postpartum, and perimenopause care. She combines her background with orthopedic physical therapy to create a program for women that includes hands on manual therapy, as well as personalized exercise programs to meet women where they are. She really focuses on prevention, healing, and long term wellness. We had such an amazing conversation that I think you're really going to enjoy here talking about perimenopause and really the experience that women have from their mid 30s beyond with their care overall, and really how you can feel your best and prevent a lot of things from coming up from the start. Now, no matter where you are in your journey, it's not too late. And this is something that we talk about in our conversation. You can really start today where you are and start to support your overall well being as well as your pelvic floor now and really prevent symptoms from coming up and support your overall longevity. So, as we talk about in this call, that's really the end game. We want to be able to feel wonderful for a long time. And so, we're really talking about how you can do that and how you can start that now. So, I hope you enjoy. Dr. Monica, thank you so much for being with me today. Hi. So I'd love to start with your story. I'd love to hear what inspired you to focus on women's health and especially like how your work evolved from kind of where you started to where you are now.
Yeah. So a little bit about me. I started doing orthopedic physical therapy kind of like as most PTs come out of grad school doing. And then shortly after I had my first son, I was sort of rudely awakened into how awful women's health was in the US and just so much was missing, and I really was like, "Hey, I got to do my part." So I went ahead and specialized in pelvic floor physical therapy and then kind of never looked back. I think that you can't have one without the other, so I do still practice a lot of orthopedic PT, but largely I see, pregnant, postpartum, and then perimenopause, menopause, kind of all stages of women's lives. But yeah, women, it's my jam. I love it. I think it's sort of this gap in care. And like I know you and I had talked about that. And it's sort of a passion of both of ours. And so I think we kind of got along real well when we started chatting about that. But sort of that's me in a nutshell.
Yeah. I love how you integrate both together because like you said, it's not like our pelvic floor just is like floating in space on its own. Same with the functional medicine approach. It's like your body parts are not separate, your systems aren't separate. So I think it's important to still have a focus on the orthopedic, physical therapy stuff too, along with the pelvic floor. So you can really integrate those together
Yeah,
and, probably really work with people much more holistically that way rather than just
totally.
focus. So
Yeah.
that's awesome. And like you mentioned, I mean, yeah, you and I do get along so well talking about women's health and our own, recently we met up and you and I were both sharing our experiences. We both just recently turned 40, if you don't mind me sharing that.
Nope, that's totally fine.
And we were both having this experience of, we don't necessarily maybe have like blatant perimenopause symptoms starting, but we notice a subtle shift in our body. Maybe our resilience to our children's annoying behaviors are a little bit lower, like maybe being a little bit more snippy or moody, maybe our body just feeling a little bit different. And I think this is an experience that I see in a lot of my patients. And I think you were sharing too that you see this in a lot of women as well. Kind of like what's your take on this? Like,
Yeah.
it's been your experience. If you want to share your person.
I think it's really interesting because I think there used to be this discourse surrounding perimenopause and menopause that really sort of promoted this propaganda that we need to sort of just deal with these symptoms of perimenopause, and there really isn't anything that we can do about it, right? So this existed, I think, for eons. And I think not until very recently do I start to see more and more like research articles. And I think a lot of practitioners are now being like, wait a minute, there are things that we can do. And I think that there are things that we can help support this population of people. And I mean, if you think about it, like how many of us are going through this right now, right? I mean, like it would be one thing if it was just a couple thousand people. But I mean, like, this is like millions of people that are going through this, and there's not a ton of resources. There's not a ton of help. And if you're looking at kind of like mainstream medicine, right? It's this sort of wait and see game
Mhm.
where it's like, let's just wait until your hormones hit rock bottom and then you have to go get help. But it's like, why, hold on a minute. Like, there's got to be something else here. And I think, you know, you and I have talked about this a little bit that like we're very fortunate to be aging, right? And like this is part of aging and I'm not saying that we need to stop this, but like let's look at ways that we can help make this more successful, right? And make it more, not to say enjoyable, but more, looking at like, can we reduce some of the deficits? Can we look at like maybe helping the dysfunction a little bit?
Mm.
Because, God forbid if this happened to a man, I mean, like,
It would be a very different story.
right. Exactly. Like, I mean, this wouldn't even exist if this was like happening to a man, right? So we won't even get into that part of it. But like, yeah, it's just really odd to me. And it's always sort of struck me as a little bizarre that there isn't more support surrounding this area.
Yeah. It's really wild. And, you said maybe enjoyable. And I argue that maybe it can be enjoyable. Like, it's a normal process that our body goes through. And luckily, there is a lot more conversation around it that, like, menopause can be empowering. This is a time of wisdom in our lives, like, ultimately, menopause. Perimenopause, yeah, gets a bad rap because it can come with a lot of symptoms. But, like, maybe we could get to a point where it is just a normal part of aging and our body changing, and maybe it could be an experience that is actually enjoyable or connecting, I don't know. Yeah. There really hasn't been any research. I mean, I think I posted recently, I think it was like in mid-90s that they were like requiring that women be part of clinical studies.
I know.
So it's like we have no information. So that's why, no one was given any sort of clue about what was happening in their body. And just now, it's like people are still having to just fight to get any kind of support for themselves. So,
And then you look at the research that was done about, hormone replacement therapy and how horrific that like data was, I mean, analyzed. And it was just, I mean, it caused large groups of women to not get the treatment that they should have gotten. Right. And you're probably seeing a lot of this in your practice too, that luckily we're able to kind of gain more knowledge about that and understand that like early intervention, right? First line of defense, like can we help these women earlier? And I know you and I kind of commiserate and we talk all about, how do we do that, right? Because it isn't just a recipe that everybody kind of can follow, right? There's nuances and everybody, you look at average age of perimenopause and it's kind of across this 10-year board. And even just like the symptoms themselves, they can be so, so variable.
mhm.
And I get this, pretty much weekly. I get a phone call of like, I don't have any issues now. Or like, I don't have any pelvic pain, or I don't have any incontinence, or I don't have any of these symptoms. So I don't really need to go see somebody. But I'm like, I beg to differ, because it's the same. I kind of paint the picture of like, we go to get our teeth cleaned every 6 months, right? Like we get our car worked on every year. Like these are all preventative things. So why is it not standard course of practice to work on, seeing a functional med doc, seeing a physical therapist, like at least to just get a baseline picture of how we function today. And so I kind of tell people it's not to scare them or to be a fear monger because there's enough of that in the world, but kind of, you know, let's look at it under a lens of prevention
Mhm.
versus a lens of like, I'm fine now kind of thing. Cause it's not a matter of like if it's gonna happen, it's just when it's gonna happen.
That's such a great point. I love that. Like taking it back. Like, why would we take better care of our cars than our own bodies?
Right.
Like, let's get it checked out. Let's make sure. And I think there is like, luckily there are more and more people who are a little bit more focused on prevention, but there really is, I think predominantly most people don't even think about it. Like, oh, there is actually something that I can do to, check out my body to make sure that it's working well before I go into, pregnancy, before I go into something that's like going to change my body significantly, perimenopause, menopause. Like, yeah, why wouldn't you go into it feeling as good as you could, like training for a marathon or something? Let's check out my body beforehand, make sure that I'm in good shape so that I have a good plan to go forward my best, yeah.
And I think that there's so much focus on the pregnant woman, right? Like, she gets all of these prenatal appointments and she gets all of these resources, and then the second she has the baby, it's like, "Good luck, see you later. Hope everything works out for you," and you really just have, maybe you have your yearly OB/GYN appointment, right? Maybe you'll have, and then you kinda cascade into your 30s, and then your late 30s hit, and you're like, something feels different," but you can't quite put your finger on it, and then you get this, like, run-of-the-mill labs, and the labs don't really show anything, and so you think, "Am I just gaslighting myself into believing that something is different?" But I mean, these nuances, like, happen very slowly, and I kinda tell patients that, like, we should really be training for a marathon and not the sprint, right? Like, let's look at ways to help optimize not just the decade that I'm in now, but, like, in my 50s and my 60s and my 70s, and, that last decade of life is always challenging for people, and I oftentimes tell people, the exercises that I provide you may seem a little odd and may seem like a little kind of not the stereotypical, routine, but it's like I really, really think focusing on, like, the functionality of the way we move is really, really important, not just for our pelvic floors, but just, like, as a human.
Yeah.
And thinking about, like, you go from young kids, right? You hold a baby, right? And you're sitting down and you're nursing a baby. Then you have a toddler, crawling baby, and then you're, like, down on the floor. And then maybe you have older kids, right? Who now you're sitting down at the table with them. And then they're asking you, "Can you kick a ball with me? Can you go running with me? Can you take me to Sky Zone and jump on the trampoline?" And then all of a sudden you're like, "Oh, but wait, I can't do that anymore." And those are sorts of the things that I tell moms that, like, let's practice for that, right? Like, let's kind of aim for not today, but let's kind of see, can we preventatively work on things that you're going to need to do in the future?
Yeah.
And
That's
I know you and I are big, like, Peter Attia fans, and, like, we look at kind of that, that Medicine 3.0, but, like, he really focuses on, like, strength training and how important it is for, can we get up out of a chair when we're 70 years old without having to utilize our hands? Like, can we open a tight jar? And I really kind of take that to heart when I give home exercise programs to patients. It's like, what are we training for?
yeah, awesome, I love that. Yeah, because we don't wanna think about when we're old, right? We're like, "Oh, I don't even wanna, like, about that." It's so far in the future, but you're right, it's like, we don't wanna get there and all of a sudden be bedridden and not be able to do anything. We can't live independently. We can't, continue to be active and enjoy our lives and be active with our grandkids, maybe even great grandkids, It's like that's actually the goal, to have a long, healthy life that is like functional. Yeah.
For sure. And if you're really looking at sort of that perimenopausal population or, like, time frame, right? So, like, end of 30s, early 40s is really when I anecdotally start to see patients report these, like, "Oh, wait, this is weird. I used to be able to do this and now I can't." Or now I have low grade back pain, or I might have now this new onset of urinary incontinence that I didn't have before. And now why all of a sudden do I just wake up one morning and have this problem? And I said, "You didn't. This is kind of spanning across, like, a multitude of years, and let's take into the fact that, your hormones are starting to kind of fluctuate, and you're now trying to kind of find a way to work in this new norm."
Mhm.
And So I get a lot of patients kind of roughly around our age will be like, "Yeah, it's weird. Like I can't tolerate doing this workout routine anymore." Or I can't do X, Y, and Z anymore. And I'm like, "No, it's not that didn't happen overnight. Like this issue probably happened over the course of a while."
Yeah.
And, as you know this, the estrogen is so crucial for women's bodies, not only just hormonally regulating, metabolic function, but like looking at how much muscle we can produce and like how much we can sustain. And then look at tissue quality as a whole. It's usually where I'll start to see women tell me that they'll have pelvic floor pain or that I didn't have any issues previously, and then now I'm starting to have, pain with intercourse, or like I'm having increased UTIs, and and sort of those signs and symptoms point me into the direction that like, okay, maybe we are having, pretty big sags in our estrogen progesterone. And I usually either send them your way, or if they are reluctant, I go at least just request to get a baseline of what your hormones are, so that at least you're not just shooting darts in the dark and trying to figure out, like, what you need to do.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. And I love how you bring it up that it's not like you're not suddenly in menopause and all your hormones are gone, but they're doing these really wide fluctuations. And yeah, if you're having these gaps where it's not enough, or we also don't talk about like testosterone and DHEA, that
Right.
they're like the unsung hormones of women. Like, oh, we don't actually have that. Actually, you have really high levels
Yep.
certain times, and like that could be dipping, and you're not seeing that, especially if it's not being tested. So that's great. Yeah. And I
Yeah.
want to ask you kind of like from your perspective too. So like maybe you send people to get some hormones done. What else do you do preventatively? And I know it depends on the person, but say someone is, we were talking about coming in and being proactive.
Yeah.
What kind of things maybe do you look at, or what do you make sure people are able to do
Yeah.
for that?
That's a great question. If a patient is not already in some kind of, like, resistance, strength training, whatever, then she needs to be on it yesterday.
Mhm.
Because it is probably the downfall of most women, is that, especially our age bracket, is that we were sort of taught this like cardio only, right? Like where you run and you get on the elliptical and that kind of thing. And I think it's starting to change. I think that, because of social media, and I think a lot of people are is becoming kind of a hot topic.
Mhm.
But looking at strength training as a whole, as being more part of what you are doing for an exercise standpoint than just maybe running and walking. Not to say that those things aren't great, but I kind of tell people, if you are not strength training to the point of failure, right? Like, I'm not talking about 2-pound dumbbells. Like, I'm talking about really resistance-based exercise. Pilates is great, fine. Reformer Pilates, but, like, I need you to lift some heavy weights. Like, I need you to work a little bit. And I think that building that amount of lean muscle mass is going to support you forever, right? And that might look different for some people. Some people are like, "I like a really good hit workout. I like that high intensity workout." And for maybe my type A, high cortisol, a little stressy women, I usually tell them like, "Maybe not. Maybe let's not do that. Like maybe just a nice 30-45 minute slower pace lifting workout would be better for you." And so I try to really tailor everybody's workouts per their need and kind of their lifestyle, but I do a full assessment of kind of how they move at baseline, right? Like what their tolerance level is, what their postures are, and the understanding that how I move is more important than like how much I move. Cuz I get a lot of people who be like, "I worked out my whole life." And I'm like, "Okay, great. That's lovely. I'm happy to hear that. But let's go ahead and do a deadlift." And it's all kinds of crazy. And I'm like, "Okay, well, let's work on optimizing the way we move." And when we look at a pelvic floor standpoint, I'm really looking at how do we utilize our glutes and how do we utilize our hamstrings. Because if you look at the attachments and you look at the biomechanics of that, they truly are the stabilizer of our pelvis. And if we lack stability in the pelvis, then our body tends to kind of look for help outside of that. Our pelvic floor muscles don't ever work independently.
Mm.
They are very much morphed together with a ton of different variable muscles around there. And if there's no cohesion and they're not working together, then you will have dysfunction 100% of the time. And I think what really drives me crazy is when I see on social media that, oh, just do Kegels. And I'm like, oh no, like let's not, because that might not be right for you. And so, I'm obviously biased, but like really getting a good solid evaluation by a physical therapist to look at that, I think is you will never ever regret that time you spent. Even if it's just one session where you go in there and you're like, how do I utilize my core? How do I utilize my glutes and my hamstrings? And then going from there and understanding like where my deficits fall.
Yeah.
And when I look at like that 40 mid-40s, late 40s patient, I have this rule in my clinic that there's no mom butt in my clinic. What I start to see is that really reduced amount of glute support.
Mhm.
And I think it comes honestly from sitting. I think we as a whole, you had a baby, you're sitting down, you're nursing, and then you're sitting and you're playing with your kids, and then you're driving and you're working. And so we're always sort of in that sitting sedentary lifestyle, and we kind of lose the ability of how to use our glutes correctly. And so I always focus a lot of work and exercise kind of foundation into regaining our glute support and understanding like how our hamstrings play into that. So a lot of the homework that I give patients are very heavy on sort of that focus and understanding that just because I can contract the muscle and make the muscle hard, it's just as important to be able to relax the muscle.
Which is
And I think I would go to say 75% of pelvic floor dysfunction is due to the fact that people don't know how to relax,
yeah.
which is wild.
Yeah. It makes sense. I mean, if you think about how, you know, tight everyone is, like walking around, not being in a good position, like you said, compensating or injuries or things that are out of whack. It's like I'm sure there's so much tightness out there. And I mean, I was lucky that I heard about pelvic floor physical therapy before I even had a kid and kind of used it. I mean, it was even just while I was pregnant before having the baby and then afterwards. But it was life changing to me to be like, oh, this is my pelvic floor. This is
Yep.
how I breathe with it. And it's like, oh wow, like I just noticed a change in being able to, like, even when I work out, be like, "Oh, okay, I'm gonna contract my core and my pelvic floor. Now I'm gonna relax it." It just feels so much more cohesive in my body, and I'm like, "What was I even doing before?" I had no awareness of this section of my body. It's just
Right. It's wild though, right?
how it
But it
tightens and all
yeah.
that too.
Oh, for sure, for sure. And I mean, like, you were the fortunate, right, few people that kind of find this out, and I think, it's so upsetting that it takes like, why doesn't everyone get to have that, right?
Yeah. It's wild to me. I think in France, it's like everyone, at least postpartum, every woman gets at least a session or something, and I'm like, "It wouldn't be that hard." Again, that, I mean, our country could do a lot more with prevention in general, but, they'd probably save billions of dollars
Oh, 100%.
to just do some of that preventatively and, yeah, just get an assessment, once
Yeah.
then.
Yeah, and I mean, like, and that's why I was, like, working with other practitioners who sort of share the same idea as me is just, like,
Mhm.
right, there isn't just one practitioner that's gonna help these women, right? So, like, looking at sort of this cohesive treatment plan, I think is so important for people and building your team that you trust and that works for you is just so important, and, I'll do assessments on patients, and immediately be like, this person has to get on hormone replacement therapy, right? Like, or some sort of assistance, whether that be, vitamins, supplements, minerals, or like nutritionally, how can we help support her? And it's so hard for these people to find that support a lot of the time,
Absolutely.
or they just don't know where to go. And like, I just wish that there was more of like this database that people could like enter and be like, hey, I have X, Y, and Z problem. Like, who do I call? Or why does it have to be either a 6-month wait list, or I have to spend, this exorbitant amount of money that I don't have or I can't afford, or my family is sort of in whatever. So it's just sort of shocking to me that we are still in a place where that happens, right? And I spend a, quite a bit of time with my patients solely just on education. Because I think, as you know, like we've talked about this before, it's so powerful, right? Like educating people and helping them understand how to advocate for themselves is not something that we were ever taught.
Yeah.
And I think our generation is finally figuring that out and being able to say, wait a minute, like if I don't ask,
Yeah. Yeah.
no one's going to
But
know.
we have to advocate for ourselves so much. And I feel so bad for some patients who are like, oh my God, they're just like begging their doctor to do something. So they're trying to like get it covered through insurance and stuff. I'm just like, yeah, it's crazy because a lot of women, lay people, we say, air quotes,
Yeah.
are better educated than their doctors in a lot of these areas. And the doctor is afraid because the guidelines say, do this, not that. And so they feel like their hands are tied. It's a mess.
Yeah, it really is. Yeah. And to touch on the guidelines thing, right? It's like, okay, so, postpartum women can't start pelvic floor PT until they're 6 weeks postpartum. Where where did that come from? What? And I'm like, it's wild to me. And the same thing goes for perimenopause, menopause. It's like, oh, we can't start HRT until X, Y, and Z, or we can't do this, this, and this. And I said, but that's based on research that is 50 something years old and really like hasn't ever really been reproduced recently. So it is just strange to me.
It's so wild. Yeah, one of mine that always gets me is DEXA scanning, like bone scan.
Yeah.
It's like when you're already in menopause, that's the only guideline on it. And I'm like, okay, so not when we have peak bone density to make sure that it's good preventatively, not when we're, perimenopausal, especially if we have a family history of osteoporosis. They're like, oh, no, no, just do it when you're already in menopause.
Yeah.
That's when it'll actually already be showing up that you have osteoporosis. And they're like, yeah, patient. I'm like, we could actually just prevent you from having osteoporosis, actually, together, right? And it's like a fairly cheap, easy testing tool. So, yeah, it's wild.
Yeah, speaking of, the DEXA scan and like bone density, that's sort of this hot topic right now, right? I feel like it comes in waves, right? Like there's a trend, the trend will come up and people will be all about it and then it'll kind of go away and go back and forth. And people have been, a lot of patients have been asking me about this whole weighted vest thing. I'm like, oh, the weighted vest. I see everybody with the weighted vests and they're like, but they don't really know why and they don't really know like the science behind it. And hey, like I'm all for it. Like I love a weighted vest. My husband and I will do weighted vest walks, but the understanding that that's a great way of prevention right there, right? Like throw on a weighted vest and get yourself out and walking, I think is so nice to enhance just like lean muscle mass to support like the density of our bones. And people and then I'll get people on the other side who are like late 60s 70s and they're like, oh, I don't really want to do this because it's too late, like I've missed the window. And I'm like, not necessarily. I think maybe, yeah, it's a little we're having to work a little harder, but I still think that you'll be able to reap the benefits of that. And I tell people all the time, weighted vests now are becoming so much cheaper and accessible, and like you don't have to spend $300 on a vest. You can run to Amazon and grab one.
Yeah. Yeah, and it's never too late. I'm glad you brought that up because, yeah, it could be harder to build muscle later on. It could be harder to rebuild your bones, but it's never too late. Even with hormone replacement, there have been like this weird, these things to say, oh, it's so much more dangerous when you start it later. Actually, it still cuts your risks in like half or more.
Considerably.
It's just, yeah, maybe there's some other side effects that maybe are a little bit like, or if you started earlier, your prevention would have even been better, but it's never too late to start any of these things. So,
Oh, for sure. And I think the collaboration, right, of working with somebody like yourself and then working with a pelvic floor PT together simultaneously to help support both aspects of it, I think is like game changer right there, right? Like
mm, the magic. Well,
it's yeah, exactly. It's like it's the magic of sort of working on a cohesive team. And I think, like we talked about before, weight training or resistance training, a weighted vest walk
mhm.
to help cardiovascular health, but also working on that bone density. And then, I like being able to, I tell a lot of my patients this, like, you can call it like a suitcase hold, like
Mhm.
holding dumbbells down to your side. And like, really, we should try to at least be able to hold like 75% of our body weight spread out between both of our hands. And somebody asked me a couple weeks ago, like, don't you think that's kind of excessive? Like, why would we need to do that? I mean, as exponentially our strength just deteriorates as we move through menopause and away from menopause, like
Mhm.
if we're not training to that capacity, there's a physiologist who did this research that said like we probably won't have enough strength to like open a jar or push ourselves, like, off of a chair, for example, and so, again, back to this, like, let's work for, like, the next decade of life,
Yeah.
and I think that always kind of resonates with me when people are like, "Oh, can I just do 5-pound dumbbells?" And I'm like, "No." Because I guarantee you that car seat and that stroller and your groceries are at least 20 pounds right
Yeah.
there.
Yeah. I feel like you can get a good workout with those with like for longer, like you're holding them for longer, but you're absolutely right. It still doesn't help you with actually lifting something heavy when you need to.
Yeah.
And it is interesting, grip strength. I'm glad you brought that up because it's so fascinating to me that grip strength is so predictive of our long-term health. It's like
It's
I
weird,
think it's like
right?
overall mortality and cognitive health and
Mhm.
vascular health. It's like the number one predictor because it's like if your hands are strong, other parts of your body are strong. Like, you have muscle on you to be able to do those functional movements. So,
Yeah.
yeah, that's a great one. I think it's a great one. I think they say like 75% of your weight for about a minute, like walking those dumbbells, right?
Yeah.
And it's split between the 2, right? Like
Correct.
yeah.
Yeah. And I mean, like, I'll be honest with you, when I first started doing that, I couldn't do it. Like, I couldn't lift 75. Like, it was way too much weight for me. And so then people are like, well, what do I do? And I'm like, you're just incrementally going to increase that over the course of however long it takes. Right. There's no time frame.
Yeah.
And it's sort of this idea of progressive overload, right? Like we need to overload our muscles in order to create them to grow and then support us as a whole. And really doing that in a means that's one, obviously safe for us to do. Like we're not power lifters. I'm not gonna like throw a bar over my back. But like understanding that like, yeah, I should be able to hang two weights down to my side for a minute and feel relatively comfortable doing it. And if you can't, then you're just going to go 5-pound weights until you get all the way to whatever your desired weight is. And understanding, like, you had mentioned this previously, but like how our breath and how our diaphragm and like how all of that kind of is supporting the way we move. And I think a lot of people don't understand that.
Yeah. Yeah. Again, I love that you take the preventative approach, and I agree. I mean, I feel like everyone who is exercising should have an assessment, right? To see what their mechanics look like,
Yeah,
see where they have strengths and weaknesses, how they're like, are you not even activating one glute, for example? And you're like, everything is completely off center. It's funny because like, I mean, I do CrossFit but I do it in a way that I really listen to my body. It feels really good.
sure.
But I look at other people sometimes where I'm like, okay, are you doing it in a way that's not really gonna, like, hurt your body or, Are you maybe not listening to some of the cues? And I feel like, yeah, having that awareness, like rather than just ending up with an injury, you should work on those things first while you're building the strength and then have it be really, be doing it in a way that is just so much better for you and you're not going to get injured in the.
And when I look at patients who have pelvic floor dysfunction, 9 times out of 10, they just lack interoception. Like, they really just lack the ability to, like, inwardly understand, like, what they are feeling. And I'm sure we can blame a million things, right? We can blame stress, we can blame our society of just like a go, 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 and we never really like kind of tap into how we feel. Or is it maybe this patriarchal medical system that like really doesn't support women as a whole, and so we kind of are left to our own devices, but like largely understanding like how do we feel truly, not just emotionally and mentally, but like physically, and how does that one movement or exercise make us feel as a whole. And sometimes people are like, "Oh, that's like too weird," or like that's too out there for me. I just want to exercise. But I'm like, then you're missing kind of a key component of really us as a human, right?
Yeah. Yeah.
And I think a lot of people just sort of I'm sure you see this a lot in your practice too, but it's the oh, it's so common, it's normal. Right. Everyone has this problem. So then it must just be normal.
Hmm. Because like you said earlier, we're not getting the education. So we hear, oh, well, this friend and this friend and this friend have it. So it must just be normal. And I'm just supposed to pee my pants every time I jump on the trampoline, like you said earlier. Right.
Or it's like you get the C-section moms who are like, "Oh, I just have low back pain now,
Hmm.
indefinitely."
Hmm.
Why?
Yeah.
What? Why? What in the world? You know what I mean? Or like, "Oh, I'm just getting older. I'm just no longer able to run because I'm getting older." Well, I'm like, "You don't have to be like that," and I'm a nerd at heart. I know you and I can we talk about this a lot, but, like, I love looking at kind of biomechanics and, like, posture and patterns, and, like, I typically will see patterns, movement patterns of people and, like, how they move and why they move, and it takes me all of 2 seconds when somebody walks in the door, and I just clock how they're gonna sit in that chair, and I'm like, I already know I know what she's gonna say, I just have to wait." And so it's sort of those things that are helpful for me to understand, like, okay, yes, it is common. Yes, that I understand that you see all of these people, but it's not normal. Like, let's not normalize these things and let's try to figure out a way to make this better for you.
Yeah. Awesome.
Yeah.
Well, you've given so many great insights today. I maybe like if do you have one last thing that you would leave people, especially maybe for someone who is, since we are kind of focusing on, the perimenopause phase, for someone who is maybe entering that or thinking ahead about it, want to be proactive, what would you say to that person?
Yeah. Let's see. I had a few notes here. Let me see, make sure I got through everything.
Yeah.
Yeah, we talked about strength and we talked about the weighted vest and we talked about functionality in movement. And I love incorporating workouts that resonate with you and that make you feel good. I'm never going to tell a patient to stop doing something that makes them feel good,
Mm.
but I always like to mix in something that is functional. Like, can we squat, right? 'Cause that looks later on in life like getting up out of a chair, getting off the toilet, getting off out of the car, those sorts of things. If we can't squat with load, then that is number 1 on your list,
Mhm.
right? If I can't do a single leg deadlift to bend forward and pick up a toy without hurting my back, then, like, again, let's add that to the list. And when people ask me like, "Oh, I wanna work on my core," I know that everyone, what," like, okay, so we kinda have to talk about the core.
Mhm.
And we talk about breath and like how those two are very much interconnected and how the pelvic floor kind of works as a trampoline. And all of those have to function together. And if we're just working on, I want to get a six pack and I want okay, let's get past how we look
Mhm.
and let's work more on how we move and how we feel. And so I tell moms who are, our age, and I'm like, do we really care? Do we really need to have like a six pack, or would you rather not pee your pants? You know, like
Yeah. At least start with the peeing pants.
that.
Right, like, at least start with how your body can feel and function,
True.
and then you can move on to the other things if you want to. If you
Yeah. Yeah. So strength training, I would say, would be my number one. And looking at functionality, that weighted vest is lovely, like a zone two workout where we're kind of sub below that threshold where we're huffing and puffing and working more on kind of this long duration amount of load and work, prioritizing our sleep and, really protecting our peace and our ability to take time and I focus on, like, down training, I call it, right? Like, can we give ourselves some time to just bring ourselves down a little bit?
Mhm.
Working on, nervous system regulation with breath. I think all of these are really important when we move into this dysregulated state because of our hormones being crazy, and we talked about being irritable, and we talked about being, annoyed and not being able like, the capacity being low. Some of that we can control with just, like, movement and working on, like, nervous system stuff.
Yeah, so important. I know I always talk about that, and I feel like it comes off as, like to some people might be like, "Oh, well, then, like, you're trying not to get people to work out." It's like, "No, no, no.
I know. Yeah.
Like, get, like, strong muscle, or, heavy resistance training, get that regular movement, like you said, it could be walking with a weight vest or without, depending on, like, where you're at. It can be pretty simple, and then having yeah, what did you call it? Untraining?
Down regulation.
Down yeah, thank you.
Yeah.
Regulation.
Yeah, and
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 too, it's
that's
like the opposite, it's the yin and yang, right? Of then let's do some non-action to bring your nervous system down so that you can handle the rest of it. So your body's not freaking out every time you exercise because it thinks that you're just, like, at war or something. You're
yeah.
reminding your body that you're safe and, you can handle more then.
Yeah, for sure. And especially as women, right? Like we carry on such a load. And I think it just, being able to acknowledge that and saying, like, okay, maybe I don't need to work out every single day at that intensity. Maybe that's not great for me. And maybe I do need to take a little bit more time to work on maybe range of motion and just mobility type things so that I don't feel stiff and sore when I wake up in the morning and my joints don't feel so achy and that I can tolerate a little bit more exercise and load in the future. But kind of learning where that balance is just so crazy important. And I feel like I make it like I'm talking to a child sometimes when I'm like talking to my patients where I'm like, we need to start here before we can get there. And sometimes it's a little frustrating, I'm sure, for people. But like that is, the building blocks and the foundation for us to be able to kind of work through the remainder of this, like you said, like it is a gift for us to be in this time frame and like let's enjoy it.
Yeah, not just white knuckle it through. Yeah. Well, I'm sure after the conversation, everyone is gonna wanna come find you and get checked out, so they're making sure that they're moving well and feeling their best. Where can people find you?
Yeah, so my practice is in Carlsbad off of Poinsettia, and I have a clinic space there. You can email me. Really, texting is kind of the easy way out. My phone is always on, and I offer a free 15-minute phone consultation. So if you have any specific questions, totally happy to hop on a phone call. I know sometimes it's a little bit easier to verbalize what's happening, but yeah, always happy to help and love to kind of spread the education and the awareness.
Yeah, perfect. Well, I'll link all your stuff to in the show
For sure. Yeah.
so that people can reach out to you.
Right. Well, that sounds good.
Well, thanks so much for being with me here today.
Yeah, thank you for having me. I'm sure we'll chat more later.
Definitely will.